News, play breakdowns, power rankings, storylines you never hear talked about anywhere else. It's all straight shots here, fired by straight shooters. S and Gun. This is the Objective Basketball Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good afternoon or whenever you are listening to this. Welcome to the Objective Basketball Podcast. My name is S. Here, as always, is Lauren Gunn joining me. Good morning, Lauren. You are up an hour earlier than I am. You see the little tired eyes that I have right now. You do not have those tired eyes.
Really? Wow.
You seem up and at 'em. So how are you?
I'm good. I'm very much a morning person. So when
Are you?
I
Okay.
am. I can get up as early as if I need to do something. It doesn't matter how early. I can't stay up. I'm not a person that can stay up all night. But if I need to be up, I can be up. Get the coffee going.
Right.
Wash the face. Get a little shower, and then just hit the ground running. So
That's
I'm doing
impressive.
grand, and I apologize if you are not.
I am not a morning person at all, but I stay up very late. So we are polar
really?
opposites in this regard. So
Oh,
I
no.
am a
You're a night
as
owl.
what they call a night owl. Yes. I'm usually up into the wee mornings of the night working. So
Wow. Good man.
Yeah,
Couldn't do
it's
it.
just
I
the way
couldn't
the
do
wo-
it.
the way the cookie crumbles, you know. And I've been like this since I was a kid. I don't know,
Really?
for some
Interesting.
reason, mornings do not get along. But we have basketball to talk about
Oh, yeah.
regardless. And look, the in-season tournament is at its final stage. The finals will be happening on Saturday. So depending on when you're listening to this, we might already have a result between the Indiana Pacers and Los Angeles Lakers. Lauren, can you tell me, if you haven't checked on social media yet, when was the last time those two teams faced off in a final?
Ooh, I have not seen on social media, so
Good. 2000. was the last
2000.
time.
I'll be
Yes.
honest, that's like more recent than I actually thought it
It
was. Gonna
was.
be.
Well, you know
I
what?
would have guessed. I'm glad you didn't make me guess, because I would have guessed like 19. Like, it would have been a long time ago. Sorry,
No,
Pacers.
it's okay. It's interesting because like it's sort of rare for Lakers and Pacers to be
Yeah.
a finals matchup for anything, right? So even the fact that they have met in the finals once, interesting,
Yeah.
right? Reggie Miller, it was Mark
Oh, right.
Jackson on the Pacers, Rick Smits on the Pacers
Oh,
as
yeah.
well. And then on the Lakers side of things, obviously the Kobe Shaq era, that was their first of 3 championships in a row. And now, 23 years later, they are the in-season tournament final.
Crazy.
It's a little bit different on both sides of things, obviously. You have a young enigmatic point guard on the Pacers and Tyrese Haliburton. And then on the other side, you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. LeBron, who is continuously defying the odds here. We'll get into that in a little bit. I want to start off with the Indiana Pacers, though, because they seem like they are the topic of conversation when it comes to the in-season tournament. They are the topic of conversation. They've made it all the way to Vegas. They won their group. They beat the Celtics. They beat the Bucks. And now they have a potential chance to beat the Lakers, which is like, that
Very
is
impressive.
very impressive to rack up wins against these teams.
Yep.
And regardless of, they have defensive issues and they can't stop a nosebleed, all that type of stuff, their offense is so dynamic. And Tyrese Haliburton, he has been incredible.
That's wild.
I guess just your perspective on how ahead of schedule the Pacers are in this regard, and like how important this was for their own, I guess, growth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important, because the Pacers, a lot of people, find them exciting. You've got Miles Turner, you've got Tyrese Haliburton, you bring in Bruce Brown, you've got shooting with Buddy Hield, but what you trade for Obi Toppin, who's been pretty solid, a solid pickup, which is why I love talking trades so much, because sometimes a change of scenery can just completely change an expectation for a young player. And that is one of the things that I find so fascinating about young teams that are over, like exceeding expectations. And so one thing that I think is so great about the Pacers that has been such a pleasant surprise is the depth. And they've got a lot of young guys on their group, and, Andrew Nembhard, Ben Mathurin, guys that, again, high expectations, but when you're getting production, especially in last night's game, all the way down the bench from Aaron Nesmith, who's closing out games, which is really, incredible. And TJ McConnell and Isaiah Jackson, who played really well, getting the production from those guys and being able to rely on them in big time games like this and have a deep rotation is huge. And so I think for Indiana, when you've got a coach that, is well respected and really solid with X's and O's, and then you've got someone as dynamic. I love that word when talking about Tyrese Haliburton. And someone to hold down the paint and Miles Turner, having those guys to come in and really step up and rise to the occasion is huge in the present, but also for your long term. And so it's been exciting to see what this team has done. And I feel like this in-season tournament has been such a wild success for so many reasons. And it's forcing people to watch Pacers basketball that wouldn't normally watch Pacers basketball and see what they're putting together, how incredible Tyrese Haliburton is and how fun he is to watch. And I think it's a huge win on so many reasons, no matter what happens in this next game for the Pacers in the short term for the rest of the season, but also in the long term for, what they're putting together.
Yeah, no, you're right. You hit the nail on the head for a bunch of different things there. The depth that you mentioned, just the fact that they, first of all, from like a team building perspective, they did such a good job post Sabonis of, hey, we're going to take a flyer on Aaron Nesmith. We are going to take a flyer on Jordan Nwora. We are going to draft. We're going to have multiple picks because we're also going to trade off some of our other players in order to draft a Jarris Walker, in order to draft a Ben Shepherd.
Another one.
You know what I mean? And these guys these are guys that didn't even play. Benedict Mathurin, right? Who was really, really good in their Celtics game, struggled in the Bucks game, but still, regardless, just another talent that they have on their roster. Yep. I think the most impressive thing to me is just the fact that they have built like a perfect, ideal offensive roster around Haliburton, and the way Haliburton complements that team from his scoring perspective, from the shooting perspective. He's such a dynamic, as you said, scorer that it opens up the rest of his playmaking game.
Yeah.
I have a video coming out in 4 hours about Haliburton's game and like how he's kind of doing this thing. And like, it's crazy because his passes aren't like so complex. He's not making the craziest reads. Yes, he does like the no looks. He does really cool passes in transition, but like in the half court, he's not making like these mind-blowing passes or anything. He's just kind of giving what the defense gives him.
Right.
And I think that's just because of his scoring threat. He's shooting, like he's the best shooter in the league this season. And it's funny because of that unorthodox jumper that he has, right? It's just, he's gone from an all-star to all-NBA guy to, if the Pacers continue at this pace, maybe in the conversation for MVP. What he's doing offensively is something that really hasn't been replicated a lot this decade. There's, when you look at his numbers, the only guys that have been near this category in terms of efficiency, he's shooting better than 67% true shooting. He's averaging over 25 points per game. He's averaging over 10 assists per game. There's actually no one that has done that. Even Jokic, which is surprising to me, even Jokic has not done that. Jokic only had 9 assists in the season where he had 20 plus points and 67% true shooting, but Haliburton is averaging more points than he did. Haliburton is averaging more passes than he did, which is incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
It's a small list, a very, very short list of players that have been able to do just the efficiency that Haliburton is doing offensively. So it's incredible to watch.
It has been.
It kind of brings up a conversation though, and you mentioned it, when it comes to what the Pacers might look like next. They obviously have this depth. We just talked about how deep this team is and how many tools they have in their arsenal, how many tools Rick Carlisle has in his arsenal to kind of throw out there. They do need to get better defensively. This team is probably limited, capped at maybe a first round team. Maybe they steal a first round series. But like, that's about it. You're not going to win. You're not going to go far just being an offensive team like this.
Right.
And they need to improve their defense. So
they do.
Now, Adrian Wojnarowski, right before that semifinals game, sent out a tweet saying, hey, I talked to Tyrese Haliburton and he's recruiting. He is saying, I need to bring people to Indiana.
Love it.
It is the basketball state, the Hoosier state. I've never been to Indiana. Have you been to Indiana by any chance?
I can't say that I have.
Maybe for the All-Star weekend. Who knows?
You never know.
Yes, but either way, so he is recruiting people to Indiana. He is originally from Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
So never heard of that either, but very interesting name. Would love to see how that place looks like. But either way, he's
Mm-hmm.
recruiting. And that means that maybe he is pushing the agenda for the Pacers to get active at the trade deadline. And I think given their depth, given some of the contracts that they have, Buddy Hield apparently requested a trade this year. Maybe that's
Right.
changed now, given how they look and how Hield looks himself.
Mm-hmm.
Given some of the contracts that they have, given where they are, given this in-season tournament, like this builds some pressure too, where it's like, hey, maybe we are better than we are, and we just won the thing, so maybe we should go out and try to push our chips in to win the other thing. And maybe we lost to the Lakers, but we're one piece away from beating the Lakers, and maybe so you can sell yourself on that if you're the Pacers.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that's necessarily the case. I think if I really was from Indiana's perspective, I would probably be as patient as possible and say,
yeah,
I'm good, I'm all right, except for two cases. Let's
hear it.
It's Pascal and OG, man. We keep coming back to this. These are the two guys that would fit perfectly on this team.
100%.
Obviously, from the defensive perspective, they bring that defensive edge, but they work well within that system, right? Off-ball cutters. One of them is a good shooter. Like OG fits very well with what that scheme is and whatnot. And I think the Raptors would be interested in some of the depth that the Pacers have. The Raptors and Pacers were really close to a trade in this summer when it came to Pascal Siakam, but things happened from Siakam's side of things where he wasn't really necessarily interested in going to Indiana. Maybe that changes now, given where Indiana is at.
Right.
Again, I don't know what the specifics would be, but do you think Indiana is going to make a run at someone this summer or today? Tomorrow, this year?
I certainly think that they will try and make a run at Pascal. I think a lot of teams that are right there that need the defense, need the size, and also need like the top, kind of a top heavy player at the top of their roster and have younger assets and draft capital to go do that. I absolutely expect them to make a run at Pascal. I think that they'll ask about OG. I just don't see now. I don't necessarily see it happening, but who knows? I think the whole free agency with OG and what that could potentially look like for Toronto poses a really interesting factor in his availability and from the outside. But at the same time, I do feel like that one seems less likely to me than Pascal. And so for a team like Indiana, it's like, hey man, if you can go make that happen, that completely changes things for you. And so I think having someone like you mentioned, the cutting, the off-ball cutting, having someone like that to add to this group, this already dynamic offense, would be just huge for them. And so I do expect them to make a run at Pascal. I think they'll ask about him too, but it's hard for me to see that happening. And at the same time, you go and you draft, you mentioned Jarace Walker, adding him to this group, they add some size. Sometimes that takes a little bit of time. You mentioned patience as well. And so seeing what that has done for someone like Obi Toppin, and you take someone like Walker so high, you want to kind of see that play out a little bit before you push all your chips in and potentially, stunt someone else's growth. So there's that counter of what that will look like. And so for the Pacers, it's like, okay, what young players would you be including for someone like Siakam? I guess from your perspective, looking at the Pacers roster, which players would you like to see included in that deal?
Yeah, well, you need the contracts to get up there.
Right.
And I think Buddy Hield is the only contract that makes sense. But then on top of that, I think you're looking at guys like Aaron Nesmith. You're looking at a guy like Andrew Nembhard, who the Raptors nearly selected. Is definitely in their top of the list. I don't know, maybe Bruce Brown, depending, because Bruce Brown has that massive contract. So might be easier to move him versus somebody else. And maybe they decide they want to keep Buddy Hield now just because of how good he's been next to Haliburton.
Right.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of different ways this could go potentially trade-wise for the Raptors. And to your point about OG, I agree with you. He's not from Indiana, but he played college in Indiana. So there's always that connection there and whatnot. But I think there's just given where the Raptors are at, I would just be really surprised if they decide to move him. I'm still on that. unless there is a Godfather-like offer. And,
Yes.
there is a Godfather offer here from Indiana that could work. It's like, okay, we will give you Mathurin, Nembhard,
Yeah,
Buddy,
that's what I'm
and,
wondering.
that's
what I'm wondering, if they're like, so on one hand, I'm like, okay, Bruce Brown, for anyone that's like, they just got Bruce Brown, why would they do that? It's like, okay, well, are they having the question of, if we bring in Bruce Brown and we bring in Pascal and move Buddy, are we losing shooting and kind of completely? So I think that there's a very real world in which that happens, or that's at least discussed at the bare minimum. And so if they're also looking at it like, okay, well, Mathurin is not quite consistently, a starter or that guy for us. Yeah. Maybe he could be. And I think that he can be. But for them, is it like, okay, well, we could go get this guy now and then trust someone like Nembhard, trust someone like even Buddy Hield in the starting lineup. And then that's a very well-rounded group that's ready to win now. I think it all comes back to how much pressure there is. And so I think if Mathurin kind of gets tossed around, that's something that I would be really interested to see, because Mathurin in Toronto and the pace and the potential that could look like, especially if you get Nembhard in there too, that could be very dangerous. And so that's something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. And man, there's, as much as like we'll get excited about a team, we'll say they're ready. Teams tend to be way more patient than us.
100%.
You know, and I think there is a level of that too. I think, Indiana might be okay saying, hey, we'll see what happens. Like you said, hey, let's see what happens with Jarris Walker. And by the way, I met Jarris Walker's great uncle this weekend.
No way.
Yes, I did. He was a very nice man. I was shooting a commercial with him, and he was a very, very nice, old man who was telling me, he actually asked me, he was like, hey, why is Bull not playing anymore? I'm like, oh, I don't know how to explain.
You're asking the wrong guy.
I don't know how to explain that one, man. I'm sorry. The NBA season is heating up, and there's never been a better time to get in on the action. Whether you're looking to hammer a Pascal Siakam player prop or ride the money line with LeGoat and the Lakers, our partners at Sign Up Expert want to make sure you're ready to sweat your bets with one of the best. Sign Up Expert is hooking up our listeners with one of the newest sportsbooks available in Canada, Betano. Betano is home to some of the best odds when it comes to betting on the NHL and offers unique markets including virtual soccer and basketball. All you have to do is get started and scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in our description to register and place that first bet. If you thought Dame Dalla being traded to the Bucks has been the best surprise of the season so far, wait until you try Betano. Don't walk, run to check out Betano. Scan the QR code or hit the link in the description to get started and start sweating your bets with the best. Always remember to bet responsibly and within your means. Viewers must be 19 plus to sign up for Betano.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, he was a very nice guy, and he had a lot of great things to say about Jarris. So, look, he's been balling in the G League too. Maybe they say, let's just hold off on things and see how this develops naturally. It's a fair thing to have, fair opinion to have. Okay, so on the other side of things, the team that the Indiana Pacers routed was the Milwaukee Bucks. They seemed pretty not interested in this game. It felt like they were disinterested in the second half. Things changed a little bit. Damian Lillard got hot. Him and Tyrese Haliburton, they went back and forth. But for the most part, it felt like they had just gotten to Vegas and they're like, hey, we got to Vegas. It's all good, baby. It's all good.
Exactly.
I don't know. The Bucks, it's funny. I saw this tweet today and I kind of agree with it. Shout out to Oren Weisfeld, but he was like, look, the Bucks, for a team that is 15-7 and second in the Eastern Conference, have so much drama. It's crazy because they're still doing well. They're still good enough to win on talent alone, but clearly the expectations haven't been there. They haven't reached the expectations people expected them to be at. Bobby Portis, according to Chris Haynes of the Bleacher Report, reported that, that Bobby Portis and Adrian Griffin, the new rookie head coach for the Bucks, got into a passionate debate. Bobby Portis, quote unquote, passionately challenged Adrian Griffin and said, hey man, you better step it up, bro. And this was post game after they got routed by the Pacers, who they were probably favored to beat.
Yes.
Look, ultimately, I do feel like this feels like this is something that applies to a lot of Bucks teams recently, but they're leaving a lot on the bone when it comes to what this team can potentially tap into. They are,
That's a good way to put it.
After to last night, the Bucks are third in offense, which is like, wow, they're still very good on the offensive end, but they are struggling defensively. They're 22nd on the defensive end. They can't stop a nosebleed. They kind of remind me of the Indiana Pacers, but
a little similar, yeah.
But the Pacers, there's just more flow to their offense. It just makes more sense. It feels like sometimes it goes between, hey, Dame, it's your turn, to, hey, Giannis, it's your turn.
Right.
And, hey, maybe we'll involve Chris Middleton here. And, hey, maybe we'll involve Brook Lopez here. There doesn't seem to be a sort of flow. And according to that report by Chris Haynes, that's what Bobby Portis was complaining about. He was saying, hey, our offensive structure late in games is not working. We are not doing a good enough job to get people involved in this offense. And I would have to agree with Bobby Portis. I think he is wholeheartedly right. And there have been a couple of puzzling decisions by Adrian Griffin. You know, he started out this year defensively, switching up their defensive game plan. They have adjusted that since. You know, Brook Lopez is playing a little bit more of a deep drop. They're playing a little bit more conservative, and that helps guys like Giannis and Brook Lopez defensively. But still, at the point of attack with Malik Beasley and Damian Lillard, they're just not good. They're allowing a lot of blow-bys, a lot of flybys, etc. So it's just weird because, like, this team is probably good right now, very good. Yep. Like, they're second in the East, but they're also not good enough, maybe, you know?
Right.
I don't know. It's just they haven't reached the expectations people have kind of placed on them. And maybe those expectations weren't fair given what the roster was around Dame and Giannis, given the rookie head coach. But how do you feel about anything that happened last night from Milwaukee's side?
Yeah, one thing that's hard kind of going on the flip side of what we were just talking about with Indiana is the bench with Milwaukee is kind of a completely different story. Like Bobby Portis obviously is very solid and proven, but kind of moving down the line, you've got a lot of youth and sometimes some inconsistency with someone like Campaign. And so that can be hard to sort of expect consistency and expect high performances, every single night. So that's one thing that I think Milwaukee kind of going into trade season is definitely going to be looking to address. But sometimes bench depth, especially in a buyout market, when you're a team like Milwaukee, that can sometimes very reasonably get addressed and very swiftly get addressed. But as far as what you were saying, going back to sort of Dame, you take over, Giannis, you take over, that strategy drives me. It's one of my least favorite things to see, and it's so common. I see it a lot sometimes when I'm watching the Mavs, and it can be so hard when you have such a dominant player. But when you get in these late game situations where it's close, relying on that mentality and not having the flow that you mentioned, not having different things to throw at people,
structure, right?
Just structure. There's so much risk involved, which is why it's something that from a basketball standpoint, I'm like, clearly I'm not qualified to understand, but I will never be able to wrap my mind around like just kind of letting two guys go to work and hoping that they can magically save the day. To me, there's too many variables, too many risk factors involved there where you have to have a system, you have to have the structure, you have to have the flow, something that you can, option 1, 2, and 3 that aren't just different guys going to get their shots. And so for me, that's something that I never will fully trust. And so I do wonder if this sort of challenge from Bobby Portis, what that changes, what discussions kind of start happening, because when you have guys like Giannis and even like Dame and Chris Middleton and even Brook Lopez and just the veteran presence that they all bring, their voices, you have to expect them to be heard as well. And so I'm curious to see kind of shortly following this, what adjustments we see, or if, maybe they didn't, I don't want to say they didn't care about the in-season tournament. I don't want to just say that, but I do want to see how serious was this from Bobby Portis in terms of how it was received and what gets implemented and adjusted for after. And so that's what I'll be looking to see, because you can always go out and sort of say, oh, well, it sure would be nice to add Alex Caruso to this team. It sure would be nice to go pick up this guy. But at the end of the day, if you're not going to have that structure and that flow, especially in clutch time in a big game where there's high pressure, to me, there's too much risk involved. And when there's too much risk, you're already asking for so many things to go right with injuries, especially with this group.
Right.
So too many moving factors. not something that I fully trust. And that's what you and I talked about when we first started talking about the bracket play of the in-season tournament, is how many things, can you trust? What can go right? Who can you trust? And right now, the trust is waning.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think when it comes to the Bucks, even when we started this season, I was obviously, you can be high on Damian Lillard and Giannis, but I was not very high on the others rest of the nucleus. And I think that's why I said the Celtics would be making the NBA Finals this year. I still feel that way. And I ultimately think that this team probably needs another summer to retool around Giannis and Dame. Because like you said with the depth is a huge issue. It just, you're not able to be as versatile.
Right.
They just can't go to, we talked about Indiana. It's like, okay, well, Mathurin had a bad game, so they went to Neesmith. And, TJ McConnell had a great game, but Nembhard got hurt in the third quarter. By the way, I hope Nembhard is good. Aurora native, shout out to him.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, like they had options, right? They had things that they could go to if one guy wasn't working, and the Bucks just don't have that. They don't have. I mean, you're asking guys like Marjon Beauchamp and AJ Green to kind of be these guys for you, and they need to develop, and they need to figure out their own roles in the NBA. They can't be those guys for you yet. So, I think that's an interesting aspect from Milwaukee's perspective. I don't know if it's like ring the alarm bells yet, because again, they're still doing well. They're still 15-7. They're still second in the Eastern Conference, and they still have the top end talent. Like they still have Dame and Giannis. And Giannis is starting to, Dame is starting to play very well. Like
he is.
I don't know. When you have that, you can't worry too much. You know?
It's like it's a bit of a balance, but kind of like it reminds me of a conversation that we had about Phoenix last year. And I don't want to get too far into that by any means or take too much time on that, but talking about retooling the roster around your nucleus and just being patient, even though these guys are on the, a little bit old. I hate to use the word old, but on they're later in their careers, I guess. Right. Yeah. And the pressure is high. You want to win now. Giannis with the extension, you bring in Dame, high expectations, but sometimes you just need that time. And as much as, fans, like you said, have maybe a lot less patience sometimes, you would like to think that the ownership, front office, all those people kind of see the vision and see what the group can be. And I think sometimes giving those young guys, the opportunity to develop could, make them trade chips and it could just help make it a more complete picture to go out and really get the well-rounded roster that they need. And right now, I don't want to overreact and just say this roster is not it. But when you have when your bench there's so much youth on your bench that the lopsidedness of that presents a huge challenge. And so it could work out for them. You never know. I love I love, Giannis and Dame, and I'm rooting for them, but I think that's a pretty big challenge to overcome. So I'm very curious to see their approach going into trade season.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with the Bucks. On the other side, with the Western Conference, it was the Lakers who absolutely demolished the New Orleans Pelicans. It was, they lost by 40 points. They just got absolutely demolished. I want to talk about the Lakers side of things quickly before we dive into the Pelicans side of things. LeBron was absolutely ridiculous. 30 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds. He made all 4 of his threes. I believe 3 of those were back-to-back in the second quarter. The Lakers in general shot 17 of 35 from 3. They shot 48%. So they were shooting lights out, which is a part of the reason why this team absolutely smacked the Pelicans. But I think the main takeaway here is just LeBron being absolutely insane. Like
nuts.
I mean, he's going to be 39 years old in a couple of weeks. I think it's December 29th or whatever that it's his birthday. He is at a pace to be an all NBA player. And I just want people to kind of realize how insane that is, that a man who is nearly 40 years old is still a top 10-ish player in the NBA. That's on nights like last night, could look like the best player in the world again. You know, and the fact that he's doing this, I think, is probably his best case, his best argument for being the greatest player of all time. It's that longevity. And the more you go back and you look at it, like, this was also the case for Kareem. Like the reason Kareem would ever be involved in GOAT conversations is because of his longevity, right? Most leader in points, leader in minutes, leader in all that stuff. And he played the longest, won in every level, high school, college, etc. LeBron is pretty similar in the sense that he's had this 21-year career, going on potentially 22 and 23, depending on how long he goes for this. And he has not slowed down whatsoever. He looks not just as good, but he looks very, very good. And like, if you compare him to 2020 LeBron, which is the year they won the championship, it's not that much of a drop off,
right?
Which is just crazy to say. I really like, we gotta not take that for granted because we're not gonna see that very often. Guys end their careers very early, right? And it's crazy, absolutely crazy to me to see this.
It was pretty crazy. I think him doing all of that, the efficiency, the numbers alone, doing all of it in 23 minutes was just. I don't know if you mentioned the minutes. I might have missed it, but yeah, doing all of that in 23 minutes is just, and the dominance, you could just see like the dominance of that game and how they kind of just gave it to the Pelicans. I mean, for the Pelicans top trio to combine for 31 points, 9 rebounds, 12 assists, and 8 turnovers.
Right.
That's like.
So let's get into that.
Zion.
Because for the Lakers, it's like, okay, cool. The only thing I would say for the Lakers, the only one point I had is that after last night's win against the Pelicans, they now have 9 wins against teams that are 500 or better, which is tied with the Celtics for the most in the league. So
a good little stat.
Yeah, they are looking better. They are kind of, the
rotation, I think, is at a good place. They're starting to figure a lot of things out. Austin Reeves had a solid game off the bench. So I think that is a huge sign for them to be able to have your starters, perform like that and then have someone on your bench like that. That was a big question that I had going into the season. What was that guard rotation going to look like? So this game specifically, in addition to some of the others that they've had this year, it was probably, I think I saw someone say that this was far and away the most complete game that the Lakers have played all year. And so I felt like, good step in the direction of this marathon of a season. But yes, the Pels. I agree with you. The Pels.
Okay, so the Pels, they struggled immensely. They are getting back CJ McCollum. He just recently came back from a collapsed lung. They also are getting back Trey Murphy. So they are healthy now. They have their full squad, right? And I think there are some growing pains when you are incorporating those guys back into the lineup. I think there is some adjustment that has to happen because you're trying to figure out what lineups work. You're trying to figure out what combinations work. But for the most part, Zion Williamson has not been very good this season. He has put up numbers, but it really hasn't been good in those 2 in-season tournament games against Sacramento and Los Angeles. Against Sacramento, 10 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. Against Los Angeles, 13 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists. And it's just, look, he's already not a very good defender. He's not putting that effort in defensively. And he doesn't have a lot of counters offensively either. It's like either I'm going to barrel to the rim or I'm not going to be able to score. And against the Los Angeles Lakers, it just felt like, and the crazy thing is he took 8 shots. He only went 6 of 8. So I feel like there's like an involvement factor. Maybe it's I'm not really even sure what it is. Shaq had a really good segment. I'm not sure if you saw it.
I hadn't seen it. No.
He essentially said like, hey, a lot of this comes down to effort with Zion, and he's not rebounding the ball well. He said, he's just like me when I was a kid, and I don't necessarily agree with that because Shaq was insane. Like Shaq was a monster.
Right.
But the fact that he is, kind of sympathizing with him, if you will,
is interesting.
Is an interesting aspect to this. I don't know what it is with Zion that isn't working. He is not a good defender right now. He is not rebounding the ball well. And in terms of the offense, it feels like some nights he feels like he's involved. Some nights he doesn't feel like he's involved. And that's part of, trying to figure out what team works around a player like that.
Right. Yep.
Brandon Ingram had a bad game too last night. So I'm not trying to excuse or put this all on Zion.
Right.
But it does feel like that's the big part of the equation. And I think we talked about this last year. This was when they were at the top of the Western Conference, and crazy. Zion looked incredible. Like he looked absolutely insane. That's the best I've ever seen Zion Williamson in my life. And it's just like, why is that not the same now? What is
Right.
what is different? What is the thing that is looking different to this team? I don't know. I wish I had the answer for you now.
Yeah, it's very tricky. I do wonder, and this is a question, this is not an observation or a statement, but my biggest question is he locked in to the current and long-term mission of the New Orleans Pelicans? Because Willie Green is someone that a lot of the players seem to really like, and CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram have continued to, express their dedication, and Herb Jones even looks, I've
Better.
never questioned that about him. And so I do sort of want, and they've got like decent bench pieces. And so I think Dyson Daniels, Trey Murphy,
like the deepest
Jordan Hawkins.
Team. Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, they've got solid pieces. And so again, I'm not shifting all the blame on Zion, but having that significant of a piece in your nucleus and kind of having that question about how locked in are you to the mission, that does sort of, I mean, those things like kind of, what's the word? Like they just bleed into other areas, and it makes things very, very challenging. And so, like you mentioned, the other top guys did not have the best performance either. And maybe that speaks to them having an off night, coming back from injuries, the Lakers just being dominant. Who knows? Like you can't necessarily pinpoint it to one thing, but with Zion, that is a huge, huge thing that they have got to figure out sooner rather than later. You can't just keep waiting on it because, injuries are a real thing. Nagging injuries are a real thing. So you never know what's going to happen around the corner. And so with Zion, I think it's something that you kind of do have to figure out sooner rather than later, because even if he is like, I like my teammates, I like Willie Green or whatever, at some point when you've got someone like Brandon Ingram and you've got someone like CJ who is struggling right now, and you mentioned the injury, but has played really well at times for this team, you've got to figure out how to put this team in the best position to be successful. And I do wonder what that means for Zion's long-term future with this team.
It's very puzzling to me because I've watched this team for a decent amount this year. And like I've had moments where I look at them and I'm like, wow, they look like they are ready to, burst through the seams. Like they are going to be a contender. Yep. They're so ready. You add Trey Murphy to this, you add CJ McCollum to this, you're cooking gumbo, right? Whatever it is. Shout out to New Orleans.
I love it.
But by the way, side note, I would love to try gumbo. Oh my God.
You've never had gumbo? I guess I'm from the South. So
I've never, never touched
when the time comes.
Yeah, I know.
My
wife, she did her bachelorette party in New Orleans.
Oh, in New Orleans.
And so she tried gumbo, and God,
did she like it?
I was so excited. I was so jealous of all things gumbo related.
It's legit.
So look, they had a little pot cooking there in terms of like what they could potentially be, right? And ultimately, I kind of leave with a lot to be desired. It kind of feels like it's funny. It kind of feels like the Bucks, because you look at this team and they're like, man, this team should be really good. They actually, even in their record, they are pretty good. Like they're not falling off by any means, but you kind of want more, and that starts at the top. In my opinion, with this Pelicans team, with Zion, with BI. BI had a really, really great game against Sacramento. He absolutely carved up Sacramento. But just wasn't the case against LA. And to be fair, I think the Lakers are a tough matchup for the Pelicans. Yeah. The Pelicans rely so much on their size. Lakers can match them with that physicality and size ultimately. So I that's what I come away with. It's like it starts with Zion, and there was that quote, from the first couple of weeks of the season where Zion is like, hey, it's been an adjustment for me. We're trying something new. We're trying to play a different way. And I'm not going to lie to you, I need to figure out a way to buy in and look at this. But right now, it just doesn't seem like it's working. And how do they pivot? How do they change? I don't know. Okay, before we head out of here, before we skedaddle, just a quick pick. Who do you think is going to win? Lakers, Pacers?
Oh, God, it's so hard. The last time, I'm just going to say it. The last time we had this podcast and we did our or not the last time, but when we did our bracket play. Right. Yeah. I changed my mind and I said, I'm believing in the Pacers. I think they're going to steal one. Yeah. They stole two. I'm sticking with it. Yeah. They stole two. So I'm gonna lean on Haliburton. I love the content with the family. It's just amazing. Yeah. So I'm gonna keep believing. I'm gonna go Pacers.
Okay, don't stop believing. Okay.
Don't stop believing.
I rate it. Look, I could see there is a world in which I could absolutely see the Pacers winning this game.
Mhm.
They are an offensive juggernaut. They might be able to just run the Lakers out of this basketball game. There's honestly a potential to that. But Las Vegas, the Lakers are playing in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
They're playing in Vegas right now, but still, like, that's pretty much a home game for them.
Mhm.
It's going to be a very lively crowd, I feel. Also, LeBron in a single elimination game usually tends to, given the
That's a good point.
21-year record, tends to be pretty good in those games.
True.
I think it would be fool's gold to not say the Lakers would win,
Mhm.
but I could totally see a case in which the Pacers win this game and just like destroy them and like run out of the gate with it. And like LeBron is resting in the third and fourth quarter because it's just been over for so long. I could see that.
Who knows?
But I do think it'll be the Lakers who win this one. I think it'll be close. I think it will be a close game.
I think it'll be close too.
Which will make the in-season tournament that much more successful. It has been successful so far. Maybe there's some tweaks that they could do. The Pacers-Bucks game was pretty quiet in the like the Vegas really didn't show up for a 2:00 game. Maybe there's some things they got to tweak there. But ultimately, a success. Everything has been a success with the in-season tournament so far. We've got one more game to go on Saturday. When you see Lauren and I on Tuesday, we will have another guest. Have we even spin the wheel yet? I don't think we have. But regardless, we will do it. And thank you so much for tapping into the Objective Basketball Podcast. From Lauren, from myself, we will see you guys later. Take care.
Follow hosts at Just S. Barahini on all socials and at The Lauren Gunn on Twitter. The Objective Basketball Podcast, delivering the NBA to you like no other.